The UN is having their General Assembly. I believe it's the 76th or somewhere up there, General Assembly. And the UN is a very strange organization. Seemingly very powerful on one side and then seemingly impotent on another side. Like they can't do much when certain issues arise that you're thinking, now is the time where a global organization that could reach out to other countries could really get something done, and then it seems like the UN's arms grows short at some of those moments. But during the assembly, they had a speech by a Caribbean Prime Minister, one Amor Mottley, and it was quite a speech. The speech caused quite a stir, and if you follow any amount of Caribbean politics, if you're in CARICOM and you've heard her speak before, Mia Mottley is a skilled politician and a skilled orator. She can speak, she can express herself, and she understands, I think, how to communicate her point across. I remember seeing a post on Facebook by one of my friends where Mia Mottley basically announced something very similar policy to one that was enacted here in Trinidad and Tobago. And she was greeted with basically applause over her announcement of this policy. While in Trinidad and Tobago, some people, the only thing they didn't do with Dr. Rowley was throw that stone at him like they did with Dr. Ralph Gonzalez over in St. Vincent. But her message was taken quite well, and someone asked, what is the difference? It's the same thing they're both saying basically, and my answer on that post was one word: tact. T-A-C-T. And I think Miss Mia Mottley has shown herself to be much more tactful than many of the average politicians. And in this case, during her speech, she said that she's going off script. This wasn't the prepared speech that she had. And at the very beginning, you see the camera pans to some in her team, and it looks like they're looking now at the paper they have in front of them. And it seems like they're agreeing, because their faces shows that level of confusion, like they don't know exactly what is going on. And to make the whole thing seem all the more boss, she pulled out her phone. And it seemed like she was winging it from her phone. She obviously wasn't reading the entire speech from the phone, because she wasn't just standing there reading, but she was reading something on the phone and scrolling. So that's another thing that I can give her some positive points for. The confidence and comfortability you see when she's talking. She's at the UN General Assembly, takes her time and poses up on the podium, pulls out her phone, and is in comfort bringing her message across. All right. But we're going to talk about the message and the speech and see if, well, at least me, if I agree with it as much as many of the other people on the internet do. And you could tell me your opinions also too, and see if you agree with it or if you disagree and where you disagree. And if you haven't clicked that like button yet, make sure to do that before we get into that. Make sure to click that like button, smash it, punch it, whatever you'd like to do, make sure it's selected, and drop a comment if you have something to say. Tell me what you think, and if you aren't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Okay, so let's see what Miss Mottley had to say.
If I use a speech prepared for me to deliver today, it would be a repetition of what you have heard from others and also from me. Equally, how many more times will we then have a situation where we say the same thing over and over and over to come to naught? My friends, we cannot do that anymore. And I ask simply that we recall 3 years ago when I made my maiden speech. I indicated from this very podium.
Just pause early on to say that I find it kind of funny that at the very start of the speech, she says that we cannot say the same things that we have been saying again. I am fed up saying these same things. We cannot say it again. And then she goes on to say, how many more times will we say these same things again? She laments about having to repeat herself and saying that she's not going to repeat herself while repeating herself. Just funny to me.
Shared with those who have simply no access to vaccines. How much more fake news will we allow to be spread without states defending the public digital space? We've come together with alacrity to defend the right of states to tax across the digital space, but we are not prepared to come together with the same alacrity to defend the rights of our citizens to be duped by fake news in the same digital space. And how many more surges must there be before we ask, when will the world take action?
Here's the thing, that one of my problems with a lot of these things, and I'll point it out in this, and as she goes on speaking, you'd see the problem persists going on in multiple things. So I understand the problem with fake news and the lies on social media and the rumors and the things that are decreasing confidence in sound science and truth. But what do we do about that? And the people she is speaking to are government political leaders. These are politicians. What do we want politicians to do about that? And bear in mind, whatever you'd like a politician to do about that, you have to give them a certain amount of power, more than they currently have. And knowing what you know about politicians, are you sure that the more power you are going to give them to solve this problem, are you sure in the first place it's going to solve the problem that you are seeing? And then, are you sure, even if it were to solve that problem, that they would give up the power and only stop at the one problem you have? Or would they see multiple problems that you don't see and also use that power in that direction? We'll see further as we go on.
More times will we hear that. And how much more must we do, Madam Vice President, before the global moral strategic leadership that our world needs comes? How much more global temperature rise must there be before we end the burning of fossil fuels? And how much more must sea levels climb in small island developing states before those who profited from the stockpiling of greenhouse gases contribute to the loss and damage that they occasioned, rather than asking us to crowd out the fiscal space that we have for development to cure the damage caused by the greed of others? And how many more hurricanes must destroy, locusts devour, and islands submerge before we recognize that $100 billion in adaptation is simply not even enough?
And that is where I fully agree with her. The idea that global climate change is to be put as a cost on the smallest of countries and island states and nation states who have not benefited, or who have benefited very slimly from all the other pollution that has already been added to the atmosphere. One of the prime examples I have would be those countries that have already decimated their forests, and then they're looking at, for example, Brazil, and telling Brazil, you could only cut so much of your forests down because we're in the entire world, and if you cut too much of your forests down, it's going to negatively affect us. Well, in my book, and I've said this before, I'm not sure if I've said it in any of these videos, but I've said it before for sure, that I think in that case, if you are a world power over in the US, and you look at me as, say, a country like Brazil, and you want me to conserve my forests, well, pay me. Because you have already made your resources from abusing your climate, from abusing your environment. And I'm not saying that I want everybody to abuse their environment, but what you have is more than me because of what you did. And then you are trying to hold me down in the position I am currently in while you continue living in your excess and tell me that I cannot do what you did to reach your excess. Well, in that case, then you need to give up your excesses partly to me. Let's share that. If we have to share the difficulty of conserving the climate and conserving the environment and this world we live in, then we have to share the wealth gained from your previous abuses of it. That only makes sense to me.
The answer, Madam Vice President, is that we are waiting for urgent global moral strategic leadership. How many more crises must hit before we see an international system that stops dividing us and starts to lift us up? How many more times must people come to this podium and speak about the plight of the people of Cuba and Haiti and see very little being done to lift the floor of social development to give those people the right?
She goes on there to speak quite a bit about the global disparities that exist currently. And that's a good bit of where the tenor of her speech was speaking about the disparities that we see from the poorer nations to the richer nations. She's speaking that we have enough resources in this world to give every child a tablet. She spoke about the wealth of the top tech companies, and if you're thinking about it, and the wealth of the top tech companies are in the trillions of dollars, and the cost to give every child a laptop, probably a tablet, sorry, probably would be a fraction of that. So you could understand it. You're looking there, seeing this amount of wealth that is accumulated in one spot, and you're seeing a need for it in another spot. And it seems like a given, like, okay, there's excess here, there's obvious need here. What we need now is something in the middle there, and I believe that's what she's referring to as the global, moral, strategic leadership. That in the middle there, to be able to distribute some of that excess to some of the obvious need. An understandable plight.
The answer, Madam President, is that this age dangerously resembles that of a century ago. The time when we were on the eve of the Great Depression, and a time when we fought a similar pandemic, and a time when fascism and populism and nationalism led to the decimation of populations through actions that are too horrendous for us to even contemplate. Our world knows not what it is gambling with. And if we don't control this fire, it will burn us all.
And this is where I start to pull away a bit from her. Not that I disagree, but I see a bit of couching there. She spoke about the age we are currently in and how much it resembles the time when the United Nations was formed, at the cusp of the Great War, when we were fighting a pandemic, when nationalism was on the rise, when populism was on the rise. And I spoke about populism on this channel before. If you've missed that video, you could probably scroll back and see if you see it. But the general idea of populism is you appeal to the popular sentiment of the country. And oftentimes the popular sentiment isn't necessarily the most sophisticated sentiment. So there's a much more groundswell, down-to-earth, grassroots feel to populism. While probably the opposite side would be the elitist style mentality. And she spoke about nationalism and the rise of nationalism, and that is also true. That was happening way back then too, where many countries were trying to get it, well, not trying, but getting more into the super patriotic nature. We're turning inward. We're turning and holding everything inward. And the problem with that is it generally increases the level of tribalism, because if everything is about my country and I'm only seeking the best interest of what happens to me and mine, that's selfishness. And generally you could see how selfishness might increase the chances of friction between states in that sense. But here's something that I noted that she missed. During that same time, there was the rise of these, what we would call in the modern terms, right-wing, far right-wing, extreme movements, the nationalist, the populist movements. There was the rise of that. But there was also the rise of communism and socialism in that same time. And the communism that arose during that time also decimated millions, possibly even billions of people. Read back the history of the Soviet Union. They arose during that same time. Read back the history of Maoist China. They arose around that same time also. And the decimation that has been left in the wake of those communist movements are regularly looked over and looked past, because many of the people speaking about it also have that leftward leaning tendency, and many of them may have friends who are currently communists, and it may be hard to say that this ideology has had a murderous past when you have people currently who are proponents of it. For example, the current UN Secretary General was formerly a leader of a socialist party. And socialism and communism are a bit different, but the general idea, and you could read Marx himself, the guy who formulated both of those ideas in basic form. Socialism is the pathway to the utopian communism. That's the general idea. So I find it's refreshing that she notes the similarities, and I think it's not coincidental, and we are at risk because of the similarities. But the similarities aren't only one-sided, and the right-wing side of the extremists are who we have to look out for. Because just as back then, there were the nationalists and the populists looking to cause mischief, and now they are the same, Back then, there were the communists looking to cause mischief, and now they are the same also. And I think if we allow ourselves to go extreme on either end, we would find ourselves in great danger. And with similar results as what happened in the 20th century also.
That the nation states of this assembly and the people of this world must indicate what direction we want our world to go in, and not leave it to the faceless few who have worked so hard to prevent the prosperity from being shared that is sufficient in this world from being shared with all of our people. I ask you today to support us, because we will bring a resolution in plenary to endorse the approach of Antonio Guterres as Secretary General. When I met with him 2 days ago, I told him we share the same philosophy. We want the same destination. The only issue is what road we take, and what are the obstacles in that road, and what are the potholes we must overcome.
And that's where I'd stop that. That last bit there, where she spoke about the the faceless few who are stopping the prosperity from being shared. I agree. There are some who refuse and through their own machinations somehow work out to get most of the earth's resources funneled straight up towards them. And we'd all like to do something about that. And she spoke about that also. And she spoke about the current UN Secretary General's approach and her agreeing with his approach, and the only problem being the path to reach there. And that's my problem too. With all of these things, I agree. There are some in this world who have almost surely through negative and possibly evil ways accumulated astounding amounts of wealth and resources that they do not justly deserve. And there are some in this world who are struggling to survive while working as hard as they can. And it really is not fair. And I would love it if it is possible to take from those wealthy and redistribute in such an equitable manner. But here's the problem with that. First off, that's basically the idea of socialism, if you're wondering. But the problem with that is who does the taking and who does the redistributing. Because currently in our current system, the people at the top of the system are already in partnership with the politicians, and they already get some of the most favorable decisions being made by the politicians. So if we are to give our politicians, because if we want redistribution of wealth on a global scale, because what we're talking about here is a global scale. She went on, and I didn't play that piece. She explained what she meant by the global moral strategic leadership. Global because it's across the entire world, global. Moral because we have to do the right thing, and strategic because we cannot do everything. We have to select what we're doing, and that makes sense. But who are we going to give the power to redistribute on a global scale? Do we understand how much power that is? And do we understand that it's people we have to give the authority to do this? If we are allowing redistribution of that amount of wealth, somebody has to say, okay, you have too much and we're going to take some from you and we're going to give it to someone else. And then bear in mind that the person who is doing this is going to be taking a salary also from this. So their job is to redistribute from the wealthiest and give to the poorest. And they have to take some to keep themselves surviving in the meantime. And let me show you how easy and tempting a populist argument is, even in the face of what could seem like very rational statements. These people have to redistribute this. And let me make the populist argument as a populist leader. Imagine me as a populist leader. I am dressed in the national colors, whichever your national colors are, and speaking with command and power, and in the local tone that appeals to you. All of these people that are seeking to redistribute your wealth are the same people who are taking their salaries from that same wealth. And they are telling you that they are going to redistribute this also fairly. But look at what salaries they take. Look at the privileges they take. Look how they live. And tell me if they live closer to the top or closer to the bottom. And if they are taking a salary from the wealth they are supposed to be redistributing, how is it that the salary they take leaves them closer to the top, but what they are redistributing still leaves those at the bottom remaining at the bottom? You're getting the picture I'm painting? these people are going to end up controlling the wealth of the wealthiest. And it's not that many people have a problem with sharing. I don't have a problem with some of the wealth from the wealthiest being shared. The problem I have is with who does the sharing. And as she spoke about global, moral, strategic. Moral meaning good, evil, good, bad. Who is going to determine good and bad on a global scale? If you took in the video I did on multiculturalism, the last video I did, that was Saturday or Friday, I'm not sure which day. The last video I did on multiculturalism, you'd understand that everyone's view of good, bad, evil isn't the same. It isn't a static view. It's very difficult to get everyone in one street to agree on a standard we could believe in as good. Much more on a global scale. So, who on a global scale are we going to all look to do good as we all see good to be in a strategic manner and to lead us all doing that? When you look at it in that way, you understand the appeal of populism and nationalism very well. That we could all forget about this thing on a global scale, come back down to the national level where we could understand things. We have so many problems that we need to see about in our own nation. Let's not look to these global leaders who I'm sure are all driving Rolls Royces and living in gated communities that are exclusive and away from everyone else. And we're expecting them, those global leaders, to somehow have the moral strategic leadership to tell someone in the back in Waterloo in Trinidad or in the back in some remote village in Barbados what is best for their life and moral for their life. You could understand the appeal of populism, but on the other hand, I also understand the deterrence of it, because populism and nationalism usually fights against something. It's reactionary by nature. We are fighting against this thing. And the problem with fighting against something is there's hardly ever a cohesive thing we are working towards. And that leaves the door wide open for some madman or mad person to jump up in the midst and lead this entire group that is fighting against this enemy the enemy they can identify. And this one person leads them away to whatever his crazy inkling was. That's the negatives of that. But before I go, she spoke that she is in agreement with what the current UN Secretary General has as his plans. But what does the current UN Secretary General have as his plans? The current UN Secretary General, in case you don't know, it has changed from Ban Ki-moon, who was the guy before that. Honestly, I didn't know it changed for so long. I believe it was since 2017 it changed. I didn't know that, actually. I thought it was more recent than that. But one Antonio Guterres is the new UN Secretary General. He is the former Prime Minister of Portugal. He was the Prime Minister of Portugal. He led their Socialist Party. He led some international socialist parties, and now he's at the head of UN. He has a pretty upright track record working at the UN previously. And one of his key areas, well, several of his key areas, one being climate change, and that the UN should have a central role in seeing the world through this current crisis, and the second being an appeal to something called universal basic income. I'm not sure how many of you have any idea what this is, but the general idea is this. Many people look forward in the world. They're looking at the future, and they're seeing that what is on the horizon is the automation of many low-skill jobs. Many low-skill jobs in the job market are going to be gone in the not too distant future. And many people see that there very likely is going to be a crisis in the work market where some people at certain levels are going to struggle to find employment. So the idea is that you give everyone a universal basic income. Everyone gets $2,500, $3,000, how much ever the agreed on price will be. Universal basic income. I believe there are some other names for it, but the general idea is basic income. Search for basic income and you'd get a lot on it. And the current UN Secretary General is actually sort of a proponent for that, because he believes that the current state the world is in is heading towards that direction. And I'm not sure I can argue that. I remember one time I was speaking to a business owner in Trinidad here, and he runs a medium-sized business, and I was talking about this very same idea, and I was asking him if he sees this as a possibility, that in the not too distant future, some of these manual jobs and a lot of the low-skill jobs are going to disappear, and we are going to struggle to find work for everyone in the labor market. And he says he thinks that's a lie, and the problem is a lack of ingenuity. And if you think it through, there would always be things for people to do. And to be quite honest with you, I'm actually leaning towards that, because there were many jobs that existed in the 19th century that didn't exist in the 20th century, and there were even more jobs that existed in the 20th century that do not exist now. For example, well, this isn't yet a job for me. It doesn't actually pay, this YouTube that I'm doing now. But for many people, this is a job. And 10 years ago, it wasn't a job. And there may be thousands of people, maybe even millions of people soon that would be doing this as a job. Jobs come, jobs go. I think there's a point to it that there is some lack of ingenuity and thinking why we're thinking that the job market is going to disappear. But I could understand the worry. But here's the problem with that. As it stands, I think if we look over in the United States, they are currently doing a bit of the universal basic income, because everyone who had to stay home because of their pandemic were given some unemployment checks. They were given the stimmy checks. If you were following the US politics, people were speaking about their stimmies, the stimulus checks, where the point was to stimulate the economy and give them this money, and they're continuing to give them some money. So I think we're getting a quick basic look at what the basic income does. And what I'd like you to do as homework, go Google US labor crisis and see how many articles are popping up. What is happening right now in the US is there are more jobs existing than there are workers willing to work in the jobs. The workers are there, but they are not willing to work in the jobs. And many on the more left-leaning side that regularly speak about wages and increasing the wages of the workers are saying that this is a win for the workers of the world, because what is actually happening now is the workers are refusing to work for these poverty wages. And I understand that point, but it's dishonest, because the workers aren't refusing to work for poverty wages in a vacuum. They're refusing to work for poverty wages when they're given money otherwise. So the government is propping up a certain part of the economy and giving them money. So obviously they wouldn't go to work for anything less than the amount that they are getting from the government. That is obvious economics for anyone. And okay, I could understand the argument that these wages are just too low and that's what's going to happen. So once you know and you understand that the actual reality of introducing this basic income, when you look at it, very likely what would happen is any small business that has a tiny profit margin and pays workers entry-level salaries is going to fold, because all the workers in your little private bookshop would be able to stay home and make more money on their universal basic income. So now you cannot run your bookshop. Or what would have to happen is all the prices would have to increase to the level where the universal basic income now becomes the zero marker. So all my books, say the universal basic income is $3,000 and my book was previously $15 in the bookstore, my book is now going to be $3,015. That's what I see is actually going to happen with something like universal basic income. And for the UN Secretary General to be a proponent of this, and our CARICOM Prime Minister saying that she's a supporter of him in this ideal, where is this going to lead? And I can tell you, on the conspiracy side, for those who have followed me long enough, I regularly tell you I do enjoy following my good conspiracies. They are very interesting, and sometimes conspiracies aren't that conspiratorial in the long run. I've seen a quote, the difference between a conspiracy and news is 3 months. So there is the conspiratorial side where many people believe that a global elite, the globalists, are out here trying to get wage slaves, people who own nothing, and just make barely enough to survive and be happy. And the universal basic income seems like a general setup that could be leading into that. What do you think? Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Do you think it's all too conspiratorial, or do you see the danger of this entire thing? Tell me what you think about Prime Minister Mottley's speech. Was it as astounding as you thought, or were there some points in there that made you squint? That's all I have for now. I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
Feel the music, rising with the tide.